Chapter 17. Visions and Secrets. Right. The sun, as it shone upon Zora's domain for the first time in those many weeks, warm the air in the wake of the rain. Zora's domain was alive with water, 1,000 fountains flowing in 1,000 directions as its people walked along its streams without the shadow of annihilation standing over them. The roar of the water draining from the reservoir was constant, every sluice opened to drain before the flood season returned. Every engineer was unanimous in their agreement, disaster had been averted. All the peoples of Hyrule, and the Zora not least of them, had been saved. The domain was a glimmering jewel, and its people found their ancient pride once more. In the heart of Zora's domain stood the piscine tower that marked the throne of its kings and its queens. At the base of that tower, where the throne room stood, the sun shone through in curtains that laid its occupants in shafts of light. The warmth was comforting, after the long days of darkness and rain, but Zelda drew no comfort from it. She was sweating, her undershirt sticking to her back as she spoke to Dorothan, who had listened with rapt attention as she relayed the story of the battle on Varuda, and the things she had seen afterward. Kaya was at her side, having also changed out of her Zora armor, though Zelda imagined that she was not so uncomfortable. Sidon, quieter and more pensive ever since returning from the divine beast, stood at the foot of his father's throne, arms crossed over his chest. No one else was present in that chamber, not Muzu, not the guards, not anyone but they four. And the vision ended as they fell to battle again. That is all that Lady Mipha showed me. No need to mention what came after, no one present needed to know of their princess's pain and grief. Dorothan shifted in his throne, the ghost of a smile playing across his face. That boy. Our scouts had indicated that the sounds of battle have continued unabated for a century, but it was so difficult to believe. Not just that a Hylian could live for so long, but that he could still be fighting, without food or water or rest. He shook his head. If it had not come from your mouth and been shown to you by Mipha, I would never have believed it. But Link is the same as he ever was. Was he? What a thing to say, that he should have always been this person, even before laying hands on the sword that called him to his destiny. It would seem so, Dorothan. Mipha believes that he will continue fighting for as long as he is needed, and that to rush to his aid without preparing would be a grave mistake. If Mipha believes so, then that is assuredly true. Your preparation must be of the absolute highest priority, and every advantage conferred to you. The light-scale trident, and he saw her reach for it and waved his hand, is yours to carry. You freed my daughter from her imprisonment, and I am sure it will be a great joy to join her strength to yours in the battle to come. Take it. Save the one that the hero carries. There is no finer weapon in all the realm, and it is still connected to Mipha. I hope that it will serve you well. What a heavy thing. Not the trident itself, but the thought of it. The import of the weapon as it lay strapped to her back. She remembered the feeling of using it against the water blight, how Mipha's knowledge and skill and strength had driven her limbs. Perhaps my body remembers some part of that. She mused, and knew that it was true, if only in a small way. More than the fact of the weapon, more than its use against Ganon, she thought of the stone monument that bore its history, how Mipha's voice had spoken through it in the story etched into the rock face, and she wondered how much more the weapon was. Thank you, she managed. It will be a comfort to me to know that you have it. The smile slipped from his face. His expression was not one of unhappiness, that Zelda could tell, but he was instantly more intent as he leaned forward on his throne, massive hands digging into the armrests. We will celebrate you, of course. I know you would rather not. You would have preferred not even when you were a child, but we will do so anyway, because my people feel we must. But before we get to that, one question remains to me. Hylia, that could be anything. She nodded. He spoke of seeing Link's battle with Ganon, of the wounds he laid upon it and the different ways in which they've been locked together. But the wounds he suffered. For all of this, you never related how he's managed to stay alive for that long, or his personal condition, or even what scars the battle has left on him. So, my question is, what state is the hero in? That, she said, the thoughts a whirlwind inside of her skull that she pieced together as she spoke, is a very good question. Mipha told me that faith and duty fueled him, but that cannot be all, can it? But I do not know. The vision was rooted in his perspective, almost, as if Mipha's connection to him was strictly personal. Looking at the middle distance, toward the ground, she did not see as Dorothan closed his eyes. I never saw him myself. I felt his pain, his exhaustion, his determination, and I felt it as he answered the call of the sword. but I do not know how he is being sustained. If the power of the sword is so great, then perhaps it is supporting him as he fights. Perhaps it is some power of the spirit of the hero that allows him to fight on long after others would have died. Maybe it's something inherent to Link himself. I don't have the information. She paused, bit her lip. No, that's wrong. I don't have the perspective to answer that question right now. Perhaps, with more of my memory. Do not let it trouble you. Dorfan's voice was gentle, his expression kind. That he fights on is the most important thing. He is devoted to his duty as the hero and as your champion. And if Nitha believes that he will not fail, then it must be true. Then he smiled, showing his teeth, and they were very much like his daughter's. May I ask a favor of you? When you defeat Ganon, because he believed in her and in his daughter and in the hero so utterly that there was no room for doubt inside of him. If she looked at him with the goddess sight, then the fullness of his fate would crush her to the ground. Where Link is free, please bring him back here. He spent a great deal of time with us in his youth and was treasured dearly by his contemporaries. And here the smile faltered, briefly, before returning. I have something I want to show him. A memento of the life he lived here and of the love of the Zora. The grin grew wider, but the joy was gone out of it. In truth, I think of him as a son, you see, and it would ease my heart to see him again. Of course. And the words from her mouth were sadder than she had realized, as if someone else was speaking with her voice, and for one moment she was displaced in time, standing on the precipice of some deeper knowledge. Then it passed, and she felt herself return to normal. I can only imagine he will want to see you, too. There. The smile was back, genuine now, happier, and he raised his hand not in a gesture of dismissal but to let her know that she was no longer beholden to this audience. She and Paya bowed together, and Sidon, still thoughtful, stepped down from the dais to join them as they walked out of the throne room. The weight of that place was immeasurable, she thought. Was that just the weight of all monarchs, all thrones, or was there something there that was particular to this place, this family? Was it the roar of the waterfalls as the eastern reservoir drained that lent it such import? Was it how Zora's domain was in many ways the most vital place in Hyrule, its sole protector against elements that would see it regularly swept clean? Or was it just that Link had walked here, a century ago, and the imprint that he had left on the hearts of his people had become an echo chamber that thundered with a voice speaking a language she did not understand? Had they loved him, she thought, not understanding how right she was. There will be a great deal of talking. Sidon's voice was low, almost conspiratorial, as they descended the stairs, about the things you have done and the doom you delivered us from. Everything said will be true, so long as it is in praise of your courage and your ingenuity and the good you have done for us. But he stopped, and they stopped too, turning to face him, and Zelda noticed that Paya let Sidon stand between them, which was a testament to the trust and faith he had fostered in the halls of Vah Ruta. We are more than the actions of our hands. This I believe. Even if you had failed, even if we had all been swept away, you would still be the most courageous souls I've ever come across. You are willing to put your lives on the line for people you'd never met, face down monsters that few living eyes have ever even seen, and I feel emboldened by the stoutness of your hearts. Paya. Zelda. He extended his hands, his left to Paya and his right to Zelda, as if seeking a handshake. You are the heroes of my people, and you will be my dearest friends for as long as I live. She clasped Sidon's hand with both of hers, and she felt the power there, power that had let him sink his claws into the flesh of the spawn of Ganon. But more than that, he was warm, and the smile he gave her when she took his hand was so bright, so raw, so happy that she could not help smiling in return. Paya was more hesitant, only slightly, as she also clasped both of her hands to Sidon's one. Sidon laughed, then practically roared with it, and the sound was so jovial that Zelda could not help laughing, too, if only a little. Shall we? She asked. Their hand unclasped, she still felt the warmth of his embrace, the radiance and kindness of his expression, as the three of them descended the long steps from the throne room. The plaza stood spread out beneath them, and her breath caught in her throat. She heard Paya gasp on Sidon's other side, at the sea of Zor spread beneath them. Every person in the domain must have been gathered there, from the smallest children to the most aged of the elders, a sea of blues and blacks and reds and greens, countless eyes looking up at them, at her, waiting with breathless anticipation. She saw the guards who had been with them at the reservoir, who had fought alongside them against Vah Ruta. Gaddison waved from the crowd, and Zelda inclined her head, hoping the light-skinned Zora would see. My people. Sidon's voice was very loud in that place of held breath and fervent whispers. A day ago, we faced the possibility of our end. Today, the sun shines on us once more, and the divine beast Varuta has been cleansed of the evil that plagued it. Tonight, we celebrate the work of those who fought to free us from the shadow of annihilation, and those who fight to banish the threat of Ganon from this land. Join me, friends. He grabbed Zelda by the wrist, and she realized what was happening a second before her, lifted her arm and Paez into the air. These are the heroes of the Zora. Their voices drowned out the waterfalls and shamed the thunder, their collective roar of physical weight exerting pressure on her chest. Sidon's laughter was almost inaudible, and he released their hands and waved with both of his, and then he called out and his people answered. Zelda. The. Wa. Aya. The. Wa. The crowd carried their names, exalting them with the name of their people, and the force of it shook the domain beneath them. Zelda waved too, laughing, forgetting for one moment the weight of what was on her. She looked at Sidon, whose face was upturned with real, unfettered joy, and then she looked across at Pyre, and the look on her friend's face brought her short. She is still worried. For Hyrule, for us, and for me. Most of all for me. I have done ill by her. How many times have I thought that, in the past few hours alone? How many times have I been shamed by the depths of her devotion? Have I been avoiding this because of how she feels for me? Am I a coward to not be able to face her? And will I continue running her because of it? Pyre was looking at her, too, and some part of her seemed torn, determined. Maybe Zelda could have understood, if she had been privy to the words Mipha whispered in Pyre's ear, or if she listened to the echoes of Pyre's heart with the power of the goddess. She had neither of these things. Only her determination. I will make this right. There was cheering, though thankfully no speeches. There was music, played on stringed instruments that Pyre recognized but Zelda did not. There was dancing, of a style that would only be possible for a people who moved through water more comfortably than a Hylian could move on the ground. There was food, fruits and vegetables and fishes prepared in ways too myriad to try them all. The celebrations were a release of the tensions of the Zora, defiance against the extinction that had been averted, as much for themselves as for the princess and her guardian and the prince and his guards, and once they got going there was no real way to stop them. Even as the children became exhausted and were escorted back to the communal sleeping pools, even as the aged declined dancing and instead partook of rich food and heady drink, the celebrations continued under the light of the domain's shining stones. No one person or group was necessary. The Zora needed this celebration as much as they needed any other essential component of life, and so it would continue. This is what allowed Zelda and Pyre to slip away with laughing, happy thanks to Sidon and Gadison and the other members of the guard who had brought them in as if they were Finless siblings. The Zora had begun to partake of drink, which bolstered their happiness, and Sidon's grin was lopsided and guileless as he bade the two of them good night. So, Zelda and Pyre returned to the inn, which was temporarily unstaffed. So much the better, Zelda thought. She drew in her breath, trying to steady herself in the arrangement of her thoughts. She had to do this for Pyre, had to make her understand how much her companionship meant to her, and more than that, there could be no secrets between them, not even to protect one of them. But Pyre spoke first, as Zelda set the light-scale trident carefully next to her bed. It has been a very long day. If you'd like to sleep, I will take watch until the innkeeper's return. Ah, the bite of shame, again, as she took her seat on the bed. Actually, Pyre, I do not think I'm ready to sleep yet. The surprise registered on Pyre's face so plainly it bordered on the comedic. Today has been full, yes, but it's given me opportunity to reflect, I suppose. How to put this? When I was channeling Mipha, it was overwhelming. She possessed an enormity of spirit that I assume is shared by each of the champions. I don't know if it was because she has been in this state for a century, or if it's just something that's inherent to the people we selected to battle Ganon, but it was frightening, personally obliterating, almost. Pyre nodded and, in what must have been an enormous act of will, took her seat next to Zelda on the bed. That small expression of solidarity, or at least the desire for solidarity, made Zelda surer than ever that she needed to do this. Seeing Link, or rather, the battle, was even worse. Not just because of the fight itself, or how he was suffering, but because it spoke to the power of the bonds that the champions had, and how it persisted even after death. The strength of their hearts ties them together, and if not for those bonds, I do not think we would be able to face the calamity. Pai set her mouth, plainly thinking as if she had been presented with a puzzle. I wonder how much of what he felt, the comparative enormity of their connection and their spirits, is because of your amnesia. I'm sure some of it is due to that. I think. Forgive me for speaking out of turn, but I think perhaps it is a great deal more than some. You carry the power of the goddess inside of you and have the capacity to wield it with the fullness of highest strength and awareness. No matter how powerful mortal bonds are, I don't know if they can compare to what you have. To what you are. What you are? Well, she wasn't wrong, even if Zelda did not like to think about it, even if it was like a barrier between them. But that barrier was enough, wasn't it? Enough reason to act. Perhaps you're right. But regardless of who is greater, I think that the champions all drew strength from their bonds with one another, and that the bonds I built strengthened me in a very real way. When I shared consciousness with Pyrrha, I intuited some degree of her understanding. I could interpret the workings of the Guardians in a more concrete, meaningful way, and that understanding carried over to our dealings with Varudra and my use of the Shaka Slate. When Mipha fought the Blight using my body as a medium, her strength flowed through me, the memory of her training, and I think I might be more skilled with polearms than I was before. Not comparable to her, but my body remembers the weight of her trident. My spirit recalls her spirit. I haven't tried using her healing magic, but I have no doubt that when I do it will come to me as easily as if she were doing it on my behalf. Something in all of this had struck Paya. She was staring down at the hands she had clenched together on her lap, not seeing them at all, the color rising in her face. She did not speak. So, Zelda continued. Paya, we've been through a very great deal together. More, I suspect, than I went through with anyone in my prior life. Save only Link. You have protected me, fought for me, been willing to die for me. I would not have made it this far without you. So, it shames me to realize that I have neglected our bond. Neglected you. Wait. And she put her hand on Paye's shoulder, which stilled the protest that was about to come and made the color rise in Paye's face. You mentioned before that you wished to see the world as I do, to share in the goddess's vision the way Pyrrha did. If you would accept it, I would be happy to show you now. Oh. There were layers to that layers that reached down to the firmament of the world, but she could not really guess at how deep they went. I had been meaning to ask, actually. I did not think it would be appropriate to do so today. It's been very trying, especially for you. She remembered crying in Mipha's arms, crying as if the entire world had ended, but she did not feel the memory. It was information, not an echo of experience. As if another person altogether had done the weeping, the mourning. Was it the girl from 100 years ago, who had loved and been loved? The goddess's vessel, who loved wholly and unreservedly? The barrier separating these identities grew thinner and thinner. Soon, she knew, she would not be able to tell them apart. But she did not feel that same grief now, mercifully, did not even feel it for Link. Was that just another defense mechanism, which would come tumbling down when reality, too insistent to be ignored, overwhelmed it? I am tired. And it hurt to admit, because she wanted Paya to think that she was strong, wanted everyone to think that she was strong. But this is important. I will rest better, I think, after doing this. Then. Please. Paya cleared her throat. Please show me. It will be an easier transition if you clear your mind. Close your eyes, if that helps. And as soon as the words were out of her mouth, Paya receded, eyes closed, and from the nascent part of the goddess sense that she held onto at all times. How much has that changed my perception? Zelda could feel the deep, meditative state the young woman had entered. Some part of her training, most likely. Well, no going back now. She reached down into the goddess power, dipping into it with her fingertips, drawing just enough, more than she had used for Pyrrha, enough to expand Paya's awareness nearly enough to match her own. I made myself and Pyrrha into nodes in a network, where our awareness each enhanced the others. What more can I do for Paya? But of course she understood, on the level that the goddess understood these things. First the connection, to make the transition easier, more gradual. Paya was next to her, but without expanding her own thoughts, Zelda only felt her as a presence, rather than in the more vibrant hues that Hylia's senses revealed to her. Of the power she made a cord, one end anchored in her own mind. Attaching the cord created a fascinating sense that she had just discovered a new limb, which up to now had been asleep and was only now coming to life as the nerves waited for fresh signals. Less than a heartbeat had passed since Paya had begun to meditate. She had given her little time to prepare, by the time she anchored the other end of the cord in Paya's thoughts. Next to her, Paya gasped. The cord between them hummed to life, echoes of their thoughts bouncing back and forth between each other. It was not possible to understand each other, not at this level, but they would. Zelda placed more of the power in the cord, and it flowed both ways, into her thoughts and Paya's at an equivalent rate. And as her own awareness expanded, she felt Paya's change, too, the power flowing through channels of her mind that had never been stimulated before. The world around them brightened, shifted. Asai, Sidon celebrated among his people, a pillar of fiery life that stood in a sea of stars, and they moved around him, and his laughter was music that fit with the sound of their instruments, and the light of the Zora as they danced and sang and ate and argued and snuck away to dark places together was more beautiful than the luminous stones that surrounded the domain, more vibrant than the stars. Zelda had given them wings, but Paya's curiosity was what carried them outward, into the world, and Zelda realized she was feeling what Paya felt, as intimately and concretely as her own experiences. A rush of giddy elation, and warmth, and thankfulness spread through her, and she did not know how much of that was herself and how much was Paya. They swept as one mind up the mountains surrounding Zora's domain, feeling the deep rumbling of the peaks that whispered their old aches and fresh soreness in a language that echoed down into the heart of the world, felt Varuja as they stood in its vigil. If it was up there, her attention turned ever to the castle, and Zelda quaked with a second discovery of the enormity of her spirit as Paya felt that ocean standing on the mountain top. If it did not see them, perhaps no one could, but looked always to the west, and from a distance they looked too. The power filled them, changed them, and Zelda pulled Paya's attention away from the castle, from Ganon and Link, with an urge that was too gentle to be called a correction. Here, she thought, and her thoughts echoed in that wordless space that they shared. Look at me. Paya looked, and Zelda saw herself through another's eyes. I am not Hylia. She thought this reflexively, almost defensively, because Hylia was what Paya saw. She was the power itself, a tower of golden light that hid deeper secrets of greater import, her shoulders hidden by a folded pair of golden wings that shone with all the grace and radiance of the sun. She realized Paya was not seeing her as she was. Perhaps there was no such thing in this place. Perhaps they all saw some signifiers of true meaning, and even with the perspective of the gods they interpreted them according to their own understanding. Tears ran down her physical cheeks because they were running down Paya's, and the echo of that feeling was in her. The awe and the duty and the hope and the love, and it was almost too much to bear. Then Paya, as any person with even the barest measure of curiosity might, looked at herself, and Zelda showed her how she saw. It was more intense, somehow, than how Paya had seen Zelda. Perhaps just because I see things so much differently, and there was a moment in that timeless space when no word or thought passed between them. Paya was a great tree, grown greater since that day in Kakariko, her duty and courage and experience and purpose forming titanic, twisting branches that reached out in a network that would touch the stars themselves. At the heart of that purpose, that awareness of her place in the world, was the core of her, and her heart was brighter than fire, shining like a jewel, so radiant with love. Paya gasped, and the connection broke with a suddenness that snuffed out the goddess awareness like a candle, and Zelda felt it like a blow to her head as Paya hit the floor next to the bed. Paya. She could not see, had to steady herself by grabbing the headboard, shook her head and urged herself not to black out. Paya, are you all right? What? And sight came back to her, and Paya had pushed herself away, her back to the next bed over, both hands clasped firmly over her mouth and tears running over from eyes that looked as if they had borne witness to her life coming to pieces. No. Gently. Carefully. Oh, I've made a mistake, but now we're stuck with it. Be careful. What happened? It took half a minute before Paya let go of her own mouth, just enough to say between her fingers, You know? She could not lie, not to Paya. She nodded. Oh. Paya closed her eyes, seemed to try to gather herself, failed utterly. Then, as pained as anything Zelda had ever heard anyone say, I'm sorry. Why ever would you be sorry? Hypocrite, to ask someone else why they are wounded by their own hearts. Paya covered her face with her hands. I am so ashamed. This is a weakness. I can't guard you like this. If you knew, I thought I would have to leave you, to... She breathed, and Zelda waited. My duties are to the goddess and to Hyrule, even more than to you. If anything were to happen, and I had to rely on my own judgment to do what is right, these feelings compromise me. I can't act as your guardian with my judgment impaired. I thought I would need to return to the village if you knew that I'd have to face grandmother with my failure and be replaced, and I couldn't. I thought that if I kept it secret, I could stay with you. I lied. I put you in danger just for my remaining here, because I wanted to stay with you so badly. Zelda sank slowly to the floor and crossed the space between them and put her arms around Paya, and at first the silver-haired girl flinched away from her touch, but then she leaned in and Zelda stroked her back as she shook and repeated, I'm so sorry. Zelda was gifted in her analysis of the world around her. That she had made it this far was testament to that. She was quick-witted, in some ways. For this, though, as Paya cried against her shoulder and was crushed beneath the image of being separated from her and by her own transgression, her own failure did not feel she had to take her time. The white-hot anger she suddenly felt at Pa, not for any real slight, but because Paya had been allowed to believe that they might be separated because of this, would do neither of them any good. She had to be calm. Strong. You will not be going home, she said, and Paya grew very still in her arms. Whatever your teachings are, whatever the rules passed down to you may be, believe this, I need you. You, Paya. We have been through too much together, our fates are entwined, now, as surely as if they had been woven. And it is selfish and cruel, but I trust you, and I trust you more because you love me. There. She'd said it, and Paya flinched only a little at the word, hid her face only a little more insistently. I would never trust anyone with my life the way I trust you. Han? She paused. She hadn't thought far enough ahead. I am afraid I might hurt you before this is over. No answer. I can't answer the feelings you have for me, Paya. Not as I am now. I don't know who I'm going to be at the end of this, or how I might change. We promised we would keep each other anchored, and we will, but I can. Oh, why did this hurt? Was it because she was hurting someone else? That didn't seem right, but there it was. I'm so afraid, still, of the world, of Hylia, of Ganon, of Mepha, of Link. There. That was true, as true as anything she'd ever said. I'm changing, Paya. Every day I move through a world inhabited by giants and I'm changing, and right now I can't love you like you love me, but please don't leave me. Curse the gods, why was that so hard to say? Why was it so necessary? I know it must hurt, but please. She could not say how long that silence stretched out. How long it took for Paya to rein in whatever was raging inside of her. How long she had to resist reaching down into the power to find calm in the perspective of the goddess. The innkeepers did not return. That was a blessing, at least. At last, after ages, Paya reached up and gently touched the hand on her shoulder. I'm okay, the Sheikah god said, her voice hoarse and nose stopped up. Zelda let go, and Paya got to her feet and helped Zelda to hers. If it is what you wish, I will not leave. This can stay between us. It is what I wish. Then that is how it will be. Paya wiped at her face with her hands. She had worn no makeup today, knowing that they would see battle, but still her face was red and blotchy. I apologize for all of that. I think I knew that you wouldn't be able to feel the same way I did. It would be unfair to expect it of you, with everything you're facing. She stood straight, breathed deeply. This isn't how I hoped to have this conversation with you, Bert. I have a lot to think about, still. A lot to work through for myself. I would like to talk to you about it again, but... She bowed low. Will you let me choose the time and place? Will you please wait until I am ready? Yes. she said, and how much lighter she felt for saying it. The night passed in merriment for the people in the domain, save for those two who slept the sleep of the physically and emotionally exhausted. The city was quiet the next morning. Only the king, the prince, and their trusted advisor were up to greet the travelers and to bid them goodbye. It was a short, simple thing. Sidon promised them eternal friendship and a place among his people. Dorfan bade them luck on their journey and beseeched them to return to him for any support that he might lend them, and Muzi was respectfully, blessedly silent. Zora's domain was a jewel amidst the falls, and the sunrise made it shimmer. So it was when Zelda and Paya took their leave, riding intertwining trails of blue light. They materialized atop the tower where Sidon had first seen them, Zelda in the blue tunic she had worn in bygone days and Paya in the traditional garb of her village. "The countryside looks so different in the daylight," Paya said. "It does. Everything does, especially from up here." The domain was not visible from where they stood, but still it was there in the distance. If she listened carefully, she could still hear the roar of the waters. Taking the shake slate from her waist, she used its gazing function to look to the north, toward Death Mountain, and then to the west, toward Hyrule Castle. A thought occurred to her, and she flipped over to the album that she had recorded in a previous life. "I wonder, are you planning our route? I had thought that we might head directly to where Varudani awaits, since that region is so close and I have an appointment nearby. But it occurs to me, looking at these pictures, that I recognize several of the locations. Here, look." She held the slate out where Paya might look at it, too. "Oh, I see. Yes, this one should be easy to place, since it is so close to dueling peaks and frames them so specifically." "Precisely. And this one looks at the castle from the southwest, if I am not mistaken, and in this one you can see Vam Meadow, so we know what region it was taken in. Even this one, with no obvious landmarks, must be in a particular forest near the Great Plateau, based on the trees. Do you wish to restore more of your memory, then?" "Yes," she said, because she did, and it was perhaps the first time it was true. She looked at Paya and she smiled wide and she felt the rush of the world spreading out beneath her, and Paya's answering smile was shocked and bewildered and still unsure of itself. "I have had enough of monsters and ghosts and beasts, at least for a few days. Let's have a little adventure and recover those memories in easy reach. What do you say?" Paya's answer was in her nod, her assurance in the way she cinched her pack and brought out her paraglider, anticipating Zelda's desire. There was more to say between them. It might be easy to predict that there would always be more. But in that moment, as the two of them sailed down from the Lanayru Tower, carried gently on the winds blowing from the domain, it felt like there was no need for words. Hyrule waited. Author's note there. That was quite a few heavy chapters in a row, wasn't it? I think we can use a bit of a more light-hearted jaunt. Actually, I don't know that this next bit will be light-hearted. Some of these memories are seriously heavy stuff, but some of them aren't. We'll see how that goes. In case it is not clear, this is absolutely not the last we'll be hearing of Paya's feelings towards Zelda. They're just putting a pin in it, for right this minute, because Zelda's not in a place where she can navigate her way through and around a relationship, or even the rejection or acceptance of a confession, and the particular complexities of this one in particular. There will be more development to come, I promise, and I will not leave this thread hanging. Anyway, I'm going to rest for a couple days after this, do some class work. I really do appreciate any and all reviews left on the story, no matter how long, how brief, or the particular tilt of the review. Let me know what you think of how the story feels so far. Let me know what you're hoping to see going forward. Let me know how you found this story in the first place. And thank you, as ever, for reading. End of chapter.